Okay, so barehead, that is what my friend has suggested. So carrying on from my last on live stream, I'm doing Gardus. I had to wait for him to come back, so in the meantime I put together the ogre from Underworlds. Could have recorded that, but didn't, so instead back to Gardus. Let's get this done. Barehead. So what he said was he actually had a preference for helmeted heads, which makes sense, given his justification of if they're in full armor and they're in combat, why would you not protect your head as well? It's a common argument put up against fantasy and sci-fi tropes, which is why it was always good fun watching The Mandalorian, because he was a person that decided to actually keep his hat on the entire time. But you know, Space Marines with 40,000 years, 38,000 years of extra development with regards to the ability to hurt and maim and kill, maim, burn, or what have you, feel very comfortable running in. But then I suppose, you know, the heads are bulletproof or whatever, some lore reason like that. I know they have acidic spit, don't they? So maybe the bullet just disintegrates as it flies towards them. Maybe they're just able to, like, you know, as it's entering the blood, it's just like whole body, skin, tissue through the head. There's some sort of acidic underlayer that just melts up whatever's been shot at them. It wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, despite being an advocate for helmeted heads, and in fact he was showing me a model that he had put together that should be unhelmeted, but he had gone through his bits box to find a helmet. His rationale, specifically with Gardus, is that Gardus' head looks pretty cool, and maybe use the unhelmeted version, which I kind of get. I think the unhelmeted version is the one that appears on the front cover of his book. So unhelmeted is what I've gone for. He also has a nice little flick of hair, a bit like Tintin. Tintin, the Stormcast. Stormcast Tinternal. That's what my internal thoughts are telling me right now. Stormcast Tinternal. So, bareheaded it is. The only thing with going for the bare head, because it looks cool, or that's what's on the front cover of the book, is do I then paint him as he appears on the front of the box, because that's his colour scheme from the book, right? Hallowed Knights, so they're blue shoulder pad guys. They're the ones that turned up in Warcry or AOS 2 or something. The ones that have all the robes. Sort of silver armour with blue highlights. Because I do like special characters. And I do tend to paint special characters with heavy inspiration from what their original colours are. If we talk about MCP for a second, I have painted up a couple of different models in slightly different patterns, so I'm currently working my way through putting together a Sinister Six, not the Sinister Six, and one of the first models I did for that was the Green Goblin, who is green with purple clothes, and to make him slightly different I painted him purple with green clothes. So I could maybe do that. Blue armour with silver accents on Gardus. But I also really enjoy doing entirely my own thing. So I'm not sure. The other Stormcasts I've painted mixes of reds and blues, and I painted one up entirely in green with lots of different dry brush effects. I'm kind of tempted. I think I saw someone online do something with this. You know, you get chrome paint. I kind of fancy seeing if I can find some gold chrome paint. You know, extremely shiny, if it's thin enough to paint a model with, and do a Stormcast in that, and then you know, still do like his face and his accents and stuff with matte paint. I wonder if you combined silver chrome with golden chrome, you could highlight up chrome. Or is that just a ludicrous idea? I'm not a chemist, so I have no idea whether or not that's feasible. But I've got to be honest, I'd be lying if I didn't say there was a significant part of me that's kind of tempted to have a bit of research into that now and find out whether or not it's even possible. I've got a couple of the Stormcast Underworlds guys kicking about somewhere, and I've got the Stormcast Warhammer World exclusive in a box somewhere. Could maybe paint up one of those, but then it's a lot of chrome paint, which I imagine probably doesn't come in little pots. Pallid Witch Flesh, if you're wondering. It's terrible, terrible paint. I would probably have to buy lots of chrome paint, wouldn't I? Which I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video, but I'm a student, and it means I'm pretty poor. So I probably can't afford to waste tons of money picking up a bunch of chrome paint, because it would amuse me. Just for my own amusement, I should say. Yeah, perhaps not. Perhaps not. it's not been very long since I recorded the last half-hour chunk of this, which I do model slowly, in case you're wondering. Take my time, clip everything off, do mod lines. Often I kit bash and convert stuff, so it takes slightly longer because every model is unique. This guy, for example, got 3 legs, so it's the wrong feet for the wrong legs, multiple legs. The legs are slightly closer together because he's on a 40mm. My friend's got the same kit, did them in 50s and built them as standard. They didn't quite fit onto 40mm, so I had to squeeze them together, which means that the leg joints where they join at the hip needed some work doing, still need some work doing. All of the bodies, lower and upper, are not matched up because I wanted to make them look unique. I didn't particularly like the back neck joint, so I'm building up my own. I mean, at the minute it's just a piece of sprue in place. And then his arms are just jutting out, and he's holding the rock at the bottom, whereas the actual kit has him throwing it above his head. So those take a little while longer. This, however, is taking more time than it should do, given that I'm just assembling it as standard. Because obviously I find myself stopping to talk to camera a lot of the time. I've been watching YouTube for a very long time, specifically hobby YouTube for a very long time. Back in the days of Templar's Crusade in 2010 or whatever it was. And I remember him sometimes doing sit and talk and model. And I think Ash does this as well from Guerrilla Miniature Games, where they start talking, they're trimming something up, and they start talking, and they stop, and they look at the camera, and 10 minutes have gone past, and they've not done any hobby, which is always the danger. So while I like looking at the camera because it feels like I'm talking directly to whoever is out there watching this, like I said in the last video, my desire to put any content out there is to foster a community of people to have a conversation with. I like conversing. I like a social hobby, which, given that I don't game so much anymore, it's a bit more difficult to foster a society of people around you when you don't do that most social part of the hobby. Last couple of years I've lived with some people that have had various crafts as hobbies, and we, a couple of times a month, arranged specific days that we'd all be around to meet up, put something on TV and all craft together. Where I am now, me and my friend, who is actually on the other side of the wall in front of me, there's not really the space for us to communally hobby. And also, as much as I enjoyed the last couple of years, I can't really discuss the current goings on in Games Workshop or Privateer Press or Fantasy Flight Games. And can you believe what they've released? Or did you see that model with someone who's crocheting? It's not something that they keep up with themselves, just in the same way as I don't keep up with all of the new patterns and stitching techniques. That might come as a surprise, but yeah, I have never well, I say I've never. My grandma tried teaching me to knit once, or twice. But it's just not a skill that stuck with me, unfortunately. I understand it probably would have been useful in later life, especially if you're crafty and you enjoy customizing things. So I've dropped a piece, that's why I'm down here, and somewhat awkwardly there is no light down here, so I'll go turn the main light on. Yeah, I think I prefer, although it's not, maybe. Right, back to the piece. Where is it? Where has it gone? Where, oh where? Where, oh where has my plastic bit gone? This is supposed to be unpolished, but as in, I just put this out, but this might all get cut. Oh my word. Don't mind me, just talk amongst yourselves. Where has it gone? Aha! Found it. They normally have better connection points, these models. It being an easier age of doing hobby. But, this doesn't want to stick nicely. That's better. Problem is, I'm putting pressure on his shoulder pad as I try to get his elbow connected up, and that's how he popped off completely. So, knitting. Yeah, she tried teaching me, but it just never stayed in my head. A lot of counting, and that's not quite how my brain works. I have what you would call an uncle who, I've never even seen him do it, but apparently he's really good at knitting, or at least he used to do when he was younger, which I think probably has something to do with the fact that he's very, very intelligent in terms of, you know, STEM type subjects, which one of those, the M, is mathematics, right? So counting, but specifically it's not counting, is it? It's, I can count, obviously, but it's keeping track. So when you're knitting, for those that may not know. You're doing a scarf, for example, you do so many stitches across, and that might be 16. And the problem that some people run into, and people that I talk to quite regularly, is that do it at least, or those that do it regularly that I talk to, is that they might get 3 or 4 rows down the scarf before they realise that 3 rows up they did 15 stitches, so they missed one. Which means then you have to unpick your progress and go backwards. Well, this uncle of mine apparently never went wrong with that. And also, when looking at the pattern of what someone's knitted, could work out where things had gone wrong. Apparently, so I was told. This is what my grandma used to tell me. Still tells me. Anyway. Not something that came naturally to me. Although, there was a thing called French knitting, I believe, which you have a little wooden thing that you hold with 4 pins, a little wooden dolly, 4 pins, and you knit around the pin, and you end up with a long thread of knitted something, which then you're supposed to be able to do something with, but I never quite worked out what it was, so I ended up, I think, just putting them on action men and stuff like that as bandoliers and shoulder straps. Anyway, when I'm not dropping model kits on camera, what I have found is that I am stopping to stare at the camera a lot and talk to you directly, which is slowing me down for a kit that should be easy to put together. Like I say, this isn't one of my trolls that I'm doing. This is Gardus, and I am modelling up Gardus as is his instructions, because I came to the realisation a few years ago that eBay prices for things that I fell in love with as a kid were getting out of hand. So, as an example, I have Thrud the Barbarian in a ready to paint pile somewhere, and I think the last time I checked on him he was about 40, 50, maybe 60 quid for a single, well, he's probably more like 40mm model. I'm a big fan of Inquisitor, and those models are all between 60 and 100 quid now, maybe 200 quid for some of them. And I collected these things at the time, but then we used to operate under everything was a conversion. Everything got converted, metal, plastic, resin, and that would be swapping of parts, or cutting parts off, which meant that you ended up with very unique models, but those classic iconic models like Siler, who I think might also have come out in my first White Dwarf. If I said last time, Chaos is something that has had a hold on me for a very long time. So that's kind of why, is everything that was Chaos came out in that magazine. My old metal Siler was in multiple parts. I used the collar of corn somewhere, I used the head somewhere on a different model, I used his arm on a possessed Corn Berserker, or one of his arms on a possessed Corn Berserker, I used his tail as a head on another Chaos thing, maybe a Chaos Warrior for fantasy. He was all in lots of different bits. I've since cobbled together as much of him as is left. I think there's still a couple of pieces that might be missing, or at least his collar's gone. I don't know where that's gone. That's not amongst my collection. Hasn't been since I've been back in England. I've got to reassemble him, a little bit of TLC with some modelling putty to make him back fresh. See, I'm stopping and talking again and not actually doing the model. This shouldn't take an hour, which is probably what we're pushing for now in these last two talks. Admittedly, 5 minutes of scrubbing around on the floor, but still. It's very satisfying to me to have fully converted models, but it takes that much longer, so you never get anything done. And then years later, you kind of wish that you had a fully complete Inquisitor Covenant model in 54mm instead of his one pistol that's on another model somewhere else. So what I tend to do now, if I can afford it, is buy a couple of the miniature in question. So I have 2 Imperial Space Marine, the plastic one. The intention being that one will be made up. Although I say I have 2, I have one here. I'm assuming that the second one is at my parents'. I'm pretty certain that did move across to my parents. It didn't just stay at the cottage. So yeah, I have 2 Imperial Space Marine. One will get converted up. One will get made as standard. Because then in 10 years' time, I won't regret not having a base version of a model that now actually I have a lot of nostalgia for, like Scyther, Chaos model, in my first White Dwarf, big fan, and Cypher. It was the first 40k model I was ever bought, was Cypher. I don't think I have a complete version of that. I did have him in blister somewhere, but I think that went. That might even have stayed in Germany, I don't know. It might have got lost along the way. Old metal Cypher, I should say, not the new plastic one. Big fan of him. I've had multiple. I might currently have a metal one with me here, but it'll probably just be the body. But I've done Khorne Berserker versions of Cypher. I've done Chaos Warrior versions of Cypher. Big fan of that model, that old model, that proper gunfighter pose, Old West inspired, or the stereotypes of the Old West, I suppose, or the how people imagine the Old West to have been based on movies. That's what I'm trying to get. That's the word I'm looking for, is the iconography of Western movies. Yeah. So Gardus is getting assembled as is, because he's a cool looking superhero landing posed stormcast, and my fear is if I chop him up for bits, that in 20 years' time I will regret not having a standard copy of him. However, I suspect that in 20 years' time, what will actually happen with all these different models that I'm putting together as standard is I will regret not having a version that is unclipped that I can put together and think to myself, oh, I remember when this came out. That's probably more likely, I think. So what the inner thoughts tell me is maybe I should be able to afford 3 versions of a model that I think is going to be a classic. One that I can put together as standard, one that I can chop up for bits and make, you know, like a Chaos Warrior version of Gardus would be quite cool. You know, just set in a unit of Chaos Warriors for Old World or 4th edition or whatever edition I'm playing, not for AOS, because then you'd be stepping on the toes of, well, that's just a Stormcast, right? And I have seen some very interesting conversions that people have done with Stormcast for undead armies, but I think there's nothing quite like Stormcast in the Old World, and so therefore big metal armoured bodied men and women tend to be Chaos Warriors. Big bulky ones I'm specifically referring to. Obviously there are things like Bretonnians, but they don't really have the bulk that Chaos Warriors did, and Gardus is like that. But right at this moment, I just want all my Stormcasts clipped and put together, and then I will paint the last. Well, I don't think I've even got half a dozen. It might be 5 that I've got left. Maybe 4. And like I said in the previous video, it'll feel somewhat significant because whatever I have... No, in fact, sorry. In the last video I said it wouldn't feel significant because they're not something I have a particular fondness for, because I never built that connection like Siler, Cypher, Corn Berserkers, all of the Chaos. But it will feel significant because it's all of one thing that I own from a particular range. Completing a range of things feels... When I'm thinking ahead to it possibly happening, it feels like it might be a special thing to me. Like I might feel a sense of achievement or accomplishment. Until I go through my parents' house and actually discover that there's some stuff tucked away. I almost said my grandparents' house then, because actually a couple of months ago, my Auntie Jeanette handed across a bunch of stuff that had been stored at my grandparents'. And there was an Empire General there in blister pack that it wasn't I'd stored it there. It had obviously been bought for me at some point, put away and forgotten about. So I had absolutely no knowledge of its existence. Been sat in their house for about 25 years. And then Aunt Jeanette finds it one day, and I have another model that I then have to decide what I want to do with it. There's a big part of me that, because it was a gift, and it was a gift given to me some years after we lost him. Yeah, there's a significant part of me that kind of doesn't want to ever paint it, just keep it in its blister. But then I do like that era of models, so I don't know, I'm not sure. And I only have one, I don't have 3, so I couldn't do one for Chaos and one for Standard and one to keep for another 20 years until I decide to do something different with it. Yeah, but barring in a couple of years' time finding a bunch of Stormcast models that have been tucked away at my parents' that I didn't remember. I am about to conclude in the next couple of months, because that's how long it might take me to paint them. In fact, who am I kidding? It might take me the next 2 years to paint them all. Yes, I know it's only 5, but there's so many other things I can be painting. Like this big guy who is now, what, 8 years old? And he's just got his first layer of paint on him. Well, actually, he's got 3 layers of paint on him. I think the term is hobby butterfly. That is what I am, hobby butterfly. But yeah, if I was to settle myself to let's paint all of the Stormcast, I could get them all done in differing ideas, unless I get gold and silver chrome paint as an idea that I can't get out of my head. I have to do gold and silver paint. Yeah, it might feel somewhat of an achievement to get all of the Stormcast done that I own. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, he's going on his base now. He's landing. His fist goes somewhere, and his foot goes somewhere else. I'm going to look at this in the actually in the indentation, is what this suggests. There's a random hole in the middle of it, but like it doesn't seem to connect up to his actual foot. There's no adjoining. Oh dear, almost lost him. There's no adjoining peg, so I don't quite know how he's supposed to go. But it doesn't matter a massive amount. Then you end up losing the model, don't you? Well, there he is. He is assembled. It only took over an hour. I have enjoyed rambling in these 2 videos. Hopefully I'll put them up. Hopefully the audio has worked this time. And if the audio has worked and I put them up, I will do this again, I think. But what I need to do is get faster at building models on camera, because it shouldn't take an hour to put together one Stormcast Eternal, despite how special he is. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.